I'm Randall Wallace, the screenwriter and director of Man in the Iron Mask. About 2 years before we started filming, I completed what I thought was the final draft of the screenplay, but I found that as I went, I had to constantly refine what I was doing and what we were planning to do. Originally, we thought the opening would be different, that it would be more open and tell the audience what the mystery was. But as we finished, we came up with this beginning as a way to instill the mystery of the story for the audience as well as the characters within the story. I really enjoyed that shot. It was a shot made by Clemens Becker, our Steadicam operator.
You dead yet?
And I knew we had chosen the right beginning when people jumped in their seats at the test audience of that shot. When Leo pokes his head into the opening and people in the audience screamed, I knew we had something going. The idea about how to do Paris in the 1660s and make it believable was one we came up with in post-production. It's an easy thing to write on a screenplay, Paris 1662, but to show it on film is something else. I really enjoyed this opening sequence doing this bit. It was about 3 or 4 weeks into the movie when we first did that shot of D'Artagnan riding down the street. But it was a kind of opening that I wanted, of the excitement and the romance of the Musketeers.
Oh, sorry, my dears. You would have enjoyed it, too. He's hung like a donkey.
So are you.
Really? Yeah. Oh, he's been asleep so long, I've forgotten about it. Okay, go on now.
Oh.
Go on, yes, leave His Holiness alone. I'll bring you back tomorrow when he's in...
Shooting this first scene with Gerard Depardieu and Jeremy Irons was tremendously exciting for me. We'd actually started our first week of shooting doing the end of the movie, or toward the end, when we were in a big action sequence. But that was a lot of action. That was a lot of camera movement. It was a lot of sword fighting and detail. This was the first scene that we filmed in which we had two characters talking. And it was crucial. It was important to go through this scene and have it be in the right tone. That you have one musketeer who is sincerely trying to pray, and another who was certainly being humorous, but who in his own mind was dead serious. He needed to overcome the pain of growing old, and desperately needed his friend to come out and try to find distractions.
Forgive me. Forgive me.
Gerard kept everybody in stitches, saying he was practicing the flatulence and had to go through various types, and naturally trying to keep this scene from being too ridiculous, from being ridiculous at all was a crucial point, and to have these guys be lovable and warm and human was something that they brought so much to. But we had a lot of work together this first day. We were trying to make this scene work, and it felt like the Three Stooges at first to me, and my heart was just sinking, and I had the crew standing around worrying that we were running behind and falling behind on our budget and our schedule, but I just couldn't bring myself to shoot it because it wasn't right. and we broke for lunch, and I sat down next to Gabe and talked with him about the scene, and I told him I just wasn't happy. I felt we weren't serious, and he was concerned about it. It was the chance to introduce his character, and all of these guys felt the same thing, I think. And I went from one to the other and said, "Here's my problem," and we came up with a scene that introduces Aramis, Porthos, and D'Artagnan. This young actor, Peter Sarsgaard, was a wonderful find from our casting directors. John Malkovich, of course, and Jeremy and Gerard and Gabe and Leonardo, of course, we had found before, we had settled on, but they had found him, and he seemed so much like John in his warmth and his voice and his attitude. And I was particularly excited about John Malkovich here. I mean, I was thrilled to be working with him, but to have him play a character who is full of heart and warmth was exciting. This is a shot of Vaux-le-Vicomte. This chateau, great palace really, was actually owned by Louis XIV at one time, and built by his finance minister, who was imprisoned because of the excess he used, and there are some stories that believe he may have been the man in the Iron Mask, the real one.
These troops will be cut off here, so shift them here and here, and then we outnumber them there. Yes, send that on its way.
Your Majesty,
The yellow sash.
but as your advisors, we feel it is our duty.
The excitement of introducing Louis XIV into this film at this point, I think, spread through all of us.
Why should my people
Leonardo was
abide in content?
so thrilled to be playing this role. He said to me at one point, I think this is the favorite role the favorite character I've ever portrayed. He may feel that about every character he portrays at the time. Being a great actor, I'm sure he does. But it was exciting to me to be thinking that we were portraying characters who were giants in history and who had to be real. I mean, who were real. And we're going to try to capture that flesh and bone character of them, the passions and the suspicions and the jealousies.
Yes, but who is he? No one can keep secrets like the Jesuits can.
Ah, Aramis.
Your Majesty.
You are a priest. But once you're a musketeer...
This was an absolutely crucial scene. Early on, Jeremy and I had had extensive discussions about how sincere Aramis was in his need for redemption, in his prayers and in his faith. And all of that sincerity hinged on this moment.
France. I wish you to kill him. I know this is a terrible thing I ask, especially from a priest, but...
If we don't believe Aramis is a man of God, that he prays sincerely, then this moment means nothing.
When I discover the identity of this Jesuit rebel, I will kill both him and the man who told me.
Once a musketeer, always a musketeer, huh? Now, about these riots.
It was fabulous for me in directing such a cast as this to see the development of the relationships and the respect among the actors. They all came in knowing that the others that they were with were great, but to see them experience that was fantastic. And after that scene, a few days after that scene, Leonardo said to me, "Wow, what Jeremy does is awesome, isn't it?" And Jeremy, independent of that talk, said to me, "Leo's a great one, isn't he?" And that was what I was feeling, and it was thrilling to have them feel the same thing. Here's a shot I'm very proud of. It had been the rainiest June in 137 years in Europe, and we were all praying for sunshine to be able to show this setting in its most glorious. On this particular day when we were filming this, and we had the king coming down to join his guests, I played a soundtrack of a ZZ Top song, Sharp Dressed Man, because I wanted to energize the cast and the extras. Whether it helped or not, I can't say, but it sure did make me more excited.
What is it now, D'Artagnan? Assassins falling from the skies?
The plans for the pig chase were not revealed to me.
D'Artagnan, look at the faces of
This is another example of the chemistry among the actors here.
who in France.
Gabe and Leonardo and I talked extensively about this particular moment because this was the first time that these two characters encounter each other. They have a deep and lasting relationship throughout this film. In fact, the relationship between D'Artagnan and Louis is at the very spine of the story. So the way they would encounter each other was crucial, and they began to work that out together.
Christine, ever since I arrived.
Mademoiselle?
Oh, thank you.
This was one of the most visually beautiful moments of the film for me. The sun was low in the horizon. One of those examples when, in making a movie, you've got everybody around tense and worried that we're losing the light and we're running out of day and everyone's tense and tired and yet what is important is this emotion.
I love you.
And the actors know that.
And I love you, Raoul.
To see a moment like this that they've waited to play, they've anticipated, and they step forward and do it in a way that I imagined years before, sitting alone at a word processor, was a magic and even heavenly moment for me. At that one particular spot where the pig throws his head around, it was scary for us all because we had rehearsed with a pig. It was crucial to us that we not harm any animals, of course, but even more so that we not harm any people. And we began to be afraid at the moment that the pig, in throwing his head like that, might hurt the man carrying him. Thank heaven it didn't happen. We took great care then. We stopped and worried about whether or not we should drop the pig altogether. But I mean, lose the pig from the scene. But it was crucial, and the guy carrying him assured us he could do it safely. The fountains were a great innovation, I thought. Originally, I'd written them as being a maze in hedges. But when we got to France, we found that such things didn't exist, and I'd been mistaken about them being appropriate to the period. And as I looked around the different great houses of France, I saw so much love of fountains and found that Louis did amazing things with technical developments of waterworks and such, and thought that the use of fountains would be perfect for this and far more beautiful than just a
I always
hedge.
thought it was impossible, but I do believe the excitement of this chase has made you even more beautiful.
Sire, thank you,
You blush. You do not wish to look beautiful for your king?
No, sire. I mean, yes, of course, sire. I mean that you are...
It's all right. I understand that you're not accustomed to these.
In this scene, we had two actors who take really different paths toward their scenes. Leonardo is really instinctive and improvisational, and it's not that Judith isn't, but Judith liked to think through very carefully what she might do and would come in ready to give absolutely everything in her first 2 or 3 takes. Leonardo sometimes would want a few takes to get into the feeling of what he might do and explore emotionally what he might do. So it was interesting for me figuring out how we would make this work. In the end, you don't make it work. In the end, you put them together and let them feel it. And they were magnificent in doing it and feeling that moment when it's real. I love this scene here. The sword through the water. I kept insisting throughout that this was going to work, and time and again we had such technical problems in trying to figure out how to do it. But it seemed to me inherent in D'Artagnan that he would be able to do something spectacular and magnificent that other men might not be able to do.
Get me a general.
This chapel was at the Chateau of Vaux-le-Vicomte. It was the chateau's chapel, a really beautiful place, and it provided us a perfect contrast and of something serene and heavenly with something hellish, like this prison was. I have to credit Leonardo completely with this scene. He thought of doing this and I remember the day he suggested it to me, and we were talking on the phone, and I was standing outside a restaurant in Los Angeles with a cell phone pressed against my ear, and Leonardo said, I think maybe when I'm a prisoner I should be raking my head across the bars. And I knew then that not only did I have an enthusiastic actor, but I had a brilliant one. At least his ideas were so exciting to me. This is another one of the shots that I think is one of the most beautiful pictures in the movie. It's like a Vermeer painting. Before we began to shoot, my wife and I were on a trip back to Virginia, and there was an exhibition of Vermeer at I believe, the National Gallery in Washington, and we drove up to see it. And just through a stroke of luck, we're able to get in. And when we walked around and looked at those breathtaking paintings, I thought, this has to be shot to look like Vermeer's. Strong sources of light and all of the technical aspects, but more than anything, to me, what makes Vermeer powerful is what is in the faces of the people, the mystery and the majesty and the love of humanity. That's really what I saw when I looked at Gabriel Byrne, that there was something deeply decent and warm-hearted about him and about each of these musketeers. But I was particularly proud of the casting of Gabe, only for the reason that the others were, there could be no argument that John Malkovich would make the best Athos of any actor on the planet. That Jeremy would be the perfect Aramis, and that Gerard would be the perfect Porthos. Gabe had not played in a period piece of this sort before, and I knew as soon as I'd met him that he was D'Artagnan. D'Artagnan, in other portrayals of the Musketeers, had been shown as a rather almost comical figure, a character of swashbuckling, which is a word that I despised and didn't want to use, wouldn't allow used on the set of the picture, in that I wanted the audience to take these men as I took them, to be people who were real, who of course were creations of Alexander Dumas and formed in a day when people believed in romantic and picaresque picaresque stories, but
I've been recalled.
but when you look at a face like Raoul plays there, and Athos here, and D'Artagnan here on the other side, you look at the real emotion there. This was not a cartoon.
I believe the king's eye has fallen on Christine.
It's true the king has noticed her, but I don't think it has anything to do with Raoul.
It has everything to do with it. The king is a dog.
Athos.
A dog and a coward. But I am neither, and so I go.
Well,
D'Artagnan, does the king have trouble finding women?
It was when we were filming this scene that I began to think that this movie is really gonna work.
I served him. And now to seduce a woman who will mean nothing to him.
And I began to be reassured as a first-time director that we were where we needed to be. We were in the groove in this picture.
I knew your temper.
You came to restrain me?
I came to...
The fire between these two men, and the heart and the passion as well. When I saw those layers, I felt it was working.
I have not yet lost faith that he may become the king we all wish him to be.
You don't know what it's like to have a son, to have kissed his hair and smelled his breath as he slept, to have watched him grow.
Yes. Fatherhood is a blessing. I can only imagine.
I can tell you now there are still moments when I watch this and it puts a lump into my throat to hear Athos's line of, you don't know what it's like to have a son, to have kissed his hair and smelled his breath as he slept, and to have watched him grow. My editor, William Hoy, is a fantastic editor and a father as well, and we were watching this one day, and he looked at me when I was feeling a lump in my throat over that moment between two fathers, one who can't admit his fatherhood. But Bill looked at me and said, you know, when I watch that scene, I think of my daughters. And I thought, well, if we can get other people to feel that, then we won't have done all this in vain.
We'll fire a volley into them. No. Close the gates.
This food riot is one of the pivotal points of the movie, and pivotal in terms of the production as well, because it was outdoors, it required crowds, it was expensive, it was difficult to do, and yet it seemed to me crucial to do. And as a producer, as well as a director and writer, I fought to keep it in the movie because I thought it was really absolutely necessary that we see D'Artagnan caring about the people of Paris, that he's the connection between the royal society and the common people from whom he comes.
You're right. It is rotten. I'll speak to the king myself. Give my word on it.
It was a place in which we affirmed the notion that charisma is a part of leadership. That charisma, true charisma, comes from character and caring. And while it sounds like a sermon when you say it in raw concepts, when it's demonstrated there, it's the sort of thing that can happen, that does happen, when someone has to step forward and show who he is. This the mistress's bedroom was a creation, another of the amazing creations of our production designer, Anthony Pratt. I had originally written it as being a place of great opulence, but our original drawings kept having a more racy quality to the drawings. I didn't want it to look like a brothel. I wanted it to look sensual, but sensual in terms of a beautiful painted palace. And I kept rejecting drawings for the walls until they went from being voluptuous women to being cherubs.
It is for your security that I have come, Your Majesty.
Oh, well, I already know about the rioting.
Your people are most anxious to love you. But they
The painting on the wall is one of Louis XIII. And there was a line of dialogue originally about D'Artagnan stepping through the painting of the man that Louis XIV, Leonardo's character, considers his father, or absolutely believes to be his father. That was one of those little nuances that you don't worry about too much when you're trying to just tell the basic story.
that it is you and not your crown that she pulls to her heart.
I love this scene too because the nature of the scene is that a father is trying desperately to have a father and son talk without being able to say who he really is, but it's all in his heart.
Until recently.
Would that be Christine?
It is good that you watch me, D'Artagnan, but I fear you watch me too closely.
Did you send Raoul to the war so that...
I love the way Leo said that line. He tried it out on me, that way of saying it, when we were talking long before we began filming. He said, I've been thinking about doing the scene this way, and he showed me. And when he did that line with that little smile, I thought, that'll be fantastic. And it was actually our first direct discussion on how we would work together. And I said to Leo, how much would you like me to say? What helps you, and how can I help you the most? And Leo said, well, what you just did, the way you lit up when I gave you a reading, is something that every actor cherishes to know from his director, what his director loves.
New chief advisor, execute him for distributing rotten food. And the next time there are rioters, shoot them.
This scene was filmed at a place called Pierrefonds. My French is excellent, as you can tell. This is a place that was we used also as the exterior for the Bastille. And I wanted a quick, desperately unexpected, horrible death for Raoul.
I'll get you some water in a moment, Mother.
This is a scene that we had in throughout the movie and then cut for time because we were running long and we had a budget we were trying to stay within, and it became one of those things that you thought, well, is there a way to do without this scene? But thinking we're not going to have this scene, it just seemed like there was a hole for me, and we found a way to get in and get that scene shot. We picked it up late with our second unit. John Malkovich showing lethal, boiling power is nothing any director has to struggle to get. But to try to portray this in a way that didn't conflict with the warmth of heart that he has was something that wondered about at first. I needn't have worried at all with John. He understood the script completely, immediately, in every dimension. All I had to do ever was just show John what I was looking for, and then he would do exactly what was called for.
Do not add your own death to this tragedy. I beg you. Get back. Get back!
I loved working out the action sequences. I really wanted them to be real, and while any sequence that requires sword fighting and knives and daggers can threaten to become choreographed and careful, I thought if we held on to the notion that the blades were dangerous and that the men were dangerous, that we would always be real.
Does your new apartment?
This room is in the Chateau Vaux-le-Vicomte. It's one of the practical locations we used. There was talk of building something like this on a set, and when you do that, of course, you're able to control the exterior conditions and the sound. We had a problem in this room of the wind sounding in the chimney, and it was a very windy night, and we had the wind whispering around the eaves of the house and making noise. But those are small worries. They're insignificant worries to me compared to the atmosphere that you get from a real place like this.
You've lost someone dear to your heart. And I have no desire.
Something I really admire in this scene between these two young actors is the layer of emotion that they brought. This is an extremely complicated scene emotionally, in which you have Judith Godrich's character, Christine, having come to the palace when her lover Raoul has been killed and her family is in desperate straits, and she's come needing the king, and she knows what the king wants from her, and yet she wants to hang on to her dignity. And here's the king who really is taken with her, and who doesn't want to believe of himself that he's only interested in her as a seduction, as a conquest. A king who finds himself surprised that he's falling in love.
You're so beautiful.
I cannot do this.
This is one of the many places I also felt that our composer, Nick Glennie Smith, did a fantastic job. Where the music is longing, and there's grief and pain in it. Not just sweetness and seduction.
Of all the wonders I have seen,
never looked upon anything as beautiful as you.
This is another of those Vermeer moments. I just love the picture. Something simple. I have this dogma that says that any shot that calls attention to the movement of the camera is a bad shot, an ego-driven shot, a shot in which a director is trying to call attention to himself rather than to the story. And I really preferred the simplicity, the most simple way to do something. And yet I didn't want to be afraid to be bold, to be accused of going for it and not making it. I'd rather go for it. I'd rather try to do something with impact than to be too careful.
Please, sit.
This is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, too. It was one of the most exciting to direct.
When we were young men and we saw injustice, we fought it.
Now we know that some problems cannot be solved with a sword.
And some can't be settled without one.
Here is the problem.
When we were doing this scene, we shot a master,
And the starvation.
putting the camera in a position to gather all four actors and the whole room. And we played the entire scene that way at first in preparation of going for close-ups. And the actors were a bit nervous in that they all wanted to be right on. They didn't want to let each other down. And they played it, and they felt that they had gotten through it. They felt okay about it. But there was fire missing in the scene. This is the master angle that I meant. But there was some fire missing in this scene, and I took them all aside, and we huddled up. And I said, you know, it's right, but it's not great. And it's not great because we're not remembering that the last time D'Artagnan and Athos saw each other, Athos was trying to come in and kill the king, and he had just lost his son, and these men are full of fire, and they all understood that. And I had a moment of standing there with my arms around John Malkovich and Gabriel Byrne and Gerard Depardieu and Jeremy Irons and thinking, oh my goodness, look at who's looking at me. And they're listening. I thought, well, this is an incredible blessing and an incredible opportunity. And they've accepted me. That was a great moment for me.
Bear it alone.
I cannot betray my king.
I thought both of these actors were just majestic here, too, that in this private moment,
I'll go with you.
there was so much heart.
For none of us will.
I know as I talk about these things that, you know, I must sound like a terrible cheerleader for my own work. But then again, I think the only way I could know, the only way I could believe that something was right was if it was moving me. If I tried to make a judgment based on what I thought somebody else might like, then my judgments would be cynical and careful and calculated. But if I made a judgment based on what was happening for me, if I was willing to be that exposed emotionally, then I could at least ask the actors to be that exposed emotionally.
I understand that there was an incident.
I love D'Artagnan's room, the sparseness of it, like a cell, like a monk's chamber, and the way the king comes seeking D'Artagnan here. Leonardo, in this scene, felt that he had trouble finding it, and that was an interesting thing for me, that his consciousness of the day we shot this was that he wasn't yet really connected, and I understood what he meant because it was a difficult thing to play, and yet the more we shot this scene, and we did about 12 takes on this, which was an unusually high number for us in this film. We usually didn't do a lot of takes. But as we worked into this scene, we had the time on this day to do it. And I thought Leonardo developed such focus and a layer here of the need to have D'Artagnan's approval, the need to feel D'Artagnan's loyalty, and the pain when it wasn't there. Or the pain of seeing D'Artagnan's loyalty divided. This shot as the moon comes out revealing the fortress took a great deal of work. It was a post-production shot, a digitally enhanced shot. And this sequence was one of the most ethereal in the picture. I always wanted this character, Philippe, the man in the iron mask, to be a character of the purification of the human soul through suffering and the longing for beauty, the appreciation of the world that's been denied him. If there was a kind of message in any of that, for me, it was that we're all surrounded by a night sky, but we don't look up often to see it. And Philippe's appreciation was a kind of prayer. This whole setting was extremely difficult to set up. This was actually done on a set, a giant set, and I can freely admit that it was a daunting situation to walk into a place where we had to construct such huge sets to deal with this. As a first-time director, to really want to spend the money wisely and do something that was under control was a great challenge. I love what all of them are doing here, of course, but Jeremy was finding a way to work this, and he was actually using a live person underneath the robes. But I really love the cuts with John and Gerard in the boat there. They really give the situation a sense of its danger.
Before I must shock you.
I'm a friend. I'm here to help you.
Jeremy would ask questions before scenes would begin, before we started filming. But once he got into his character, he didn't ever need to talk about what he was going to do. He would seem to just know instinctively how it would be to carry a person under the robes, his being breathless, the level of danger that he would have to do, and if I wanted to change anything at all, just the slightest suggestion, and he knew right away the direction I needed to go. There wasn't a lot of talking that we needed to do beyond the initial concepts of character. Once we had settled on that together, then he knew which way he needed to go to make it work.
Prisoner has a fever, just like the other prisoners. Plague? Plague? She brought plague in here.
I've got to say, I actually admired these two jailers and all of the actors who came into play with these other great actors, they could be intimidating to have to do a scene with actors who had the credits and the professional standing that these other guys had, and all of them, especially a guy like Gerard, because we were in France and working with on his home field, were fantastic at making the other actors feel at home. There was never any attitude conveyed to the other actors except respect for what they were doing and there to do.
Hurry! Hurry up! Via! Get away! Hey, go away! Hurry! Hurry!
This set, we actually used several times, and it is the same set revamped, the same set that we used for the water passages later in the film. I love this shot. While we were doing it, someone asked me if we needed to do the flames lower, and I said no, I want them about twice as high as they are, and that's what we ended up with. This again is the same set rebuilt on a later day. It's a set that they just left. We were going to go to the coast of France to do it, but the waves at the time of year we were shooting were like a bathtub, and I wanted them storm-tossed, and finding a cove was extremely difficult and expensive, so we ended up revamping our set and doing that scene of the boat arriving inside. Now this setting, when we first discovered it, everybody in the crew was trying to figure out how we could pull together the money to buy this manor house, a gorgeous place out in the country near Le Mans. Now this is a shot that I'm particularly proud of visually. As I said, I tried not to do shots that would be that would call attention to camera work or angles, but that is no excuse for a shot that's not visually interesting. Obviously, film is about images, and you want to have shots that are powerful. And when I came up with this one, the mask lifted off slowly and the flames burning through the eyes, I was really excited about it. And the layers of what was going on with each of the characters at this point. Obviously, this is a point that we could have gone much faster. We could have pulled the mask off and not let this moment sing. I love Gerard's face there. Character who's been full of humor through most of the story and such warmth. I thought Leo here was absolutely magnificent. And all the musketeers standing there. Again, this is another of those Vermeer shots. I love what Nick did with the music as well. The way we would work for the music was that in our temporary track, Bill Hoy, the editor, and I would go through what we thought would be good music and find temporary music from other films to use, and would lay that in as a sample, and we were able to experiment there with different tones of music, different approaches, and then we'd play that to Nick, and he would write something original and come in and play it for us, and in that way we honed down to something. Obviously Nick had to get inspired, and he certainly did, in my opinion.
Why was this done to me?
You don't know. What do you remember?
This was one of those great moments for me in which John and Leo were playing together, and they developed on the screen. They developed a kind of relationship that they were developing off the screen. And Leo had been immediately interested in doing this film. And certainly, I flatter myself that it was because of the role as well, and the other things that he would get to play, and I'm sure they were big factors in it. But he was also tremendously excited to get an opportunity to play with John Malkovich, as well as the others. But he had held Malkovich as one of his idols, and so to see him come and not be disappointed, but on the contrary, to find that John Malkovich was every bit as good as he thought he was, and to see John develop a real respect and affection for Leo was really heartwarming, and especially exciting creatively.
Thank you for your kindness.
All the actors felt that way about each other. I really want to emphasize that. Gabe and Leo had known each other for some time, and Leo absolutely loved Gerard, and he thought Jeremy was terrific. Now, this is a scene that audiences just love, and I loved. It's one of those things that when you put out something that makes you laugh, you really are exposed. I mean, and somebody may be in agreement with your dramatic taste, but may think that your sense of humor is ludicrous. But I thought this was fantastic, and Gerard made this work by not being over the top, by not being buffoonish with it.
I'm wasting your way. Even women don't interest me anymore. Now say goodbye to Porthos. For he...
Now watch this little stagger. Watch Gerard. When he walks across, unsteady. The guy is a physical genius.
You seek facts where you should be seeking the truth.
You're not my priest, Aramis. You would not be even if I had one.
That's bitter.
This could have been a hard scene to play, and yet they made it so easy.
Who you held as a brother.
The complexity of these thoughts, I mean,
What gives you the right to judge me, to play God with the lives of others?
to keep the relationship, two friends who could say anything to each other and still be friends.
What is it? Kidney stones.
Gerard kept everybody on the set in a great mood, and he would come by and slap me on the back and find a way to make me laugh, no matter how tired I was.
He's ready.
This was one of the most difficult sequences in the whole film to shoot. It was because the sequence was spread out in the schedule. It required a great deal of time to do because there were many different angles. The angles of all the characters looking at each other, and with each character you had the angle of that character looking at the other characters around the table. One would think, as an inexperienced director, that sitting four people at a table might make it easy, but it doesn't. If you seated them all on the same side of the table like the Dutch masters, that might work, but it wouldn't be real. But this was a scene in which I wanted the kind of visual ballet of changes in sizes, because we see that We're tight on Philippe, hearing the story of his life. This scene of Anne Perio was one that we'd originally thought we would have to drop for time and money, but we found a way to get in and shoot that late at night after everybody else had finished in the main crew. We took the second unit and shot her there.
True identity kept from you. On his deathbed, he
And
revealed
here,
his existence to Louis and your mother.
Philippe has so much going on.
That you had died at birth,
I thought Leonardo was fantastic in this.
believing it. And she wished to restore your birthright. But now Louis was king. He was afraid to kill you.
Hearing the story of his
His
life.
claim of power rested on the sanctity of royal blood.
And these flashbacks are the ones that
He devised a way
that originally we had thought about putting in at the beginning of the movie. The story of the birth.
for my king.
Possibly using this one, but I knew that this piece would be unlikely to go at the beginning of the movie, but we had thought to keep a lot of this secret. To keep it secret until now was more powerful.
Until I have restored you to what is yours.
Restored?
We will replace Louis with Philippe.
That is your plan? Exchanging one for the other? It's ludicrous.
I can assure you.
It was great in the test audiences to hear the audience laugh at this moment.
In the streets.
At least it's a chance.
And the audience, of course, loves Gerard. And to see that they were liking each character as passionate and vehement as each of them could be. John Malkovich there, Jeremy there, Gerard. All of them fully into character. Each character having his sails fully set and catching the wind in this scene. And here, Leo, so still and vulnerable.
If you have the heart to take that chance. Do you have that heart, Philippe? Do you? Do you?
That scene just really grabbed me. When I remember watching Leo's eyes on the monitor when he was doing that and thinking, that's the one, that's the take. And I really wanted this angle of John's hand moving up and his hesitation to touch this other boy and to adopt him, as it were, as a son, and all that meant, and his reluctance to do it, and yet his inability to let Philippe stand there so alone to suffer. And now to go from Philippe to see Louis this way, this is an example to me of what makes Leonardo DiCaprio a brilliant actor. The same physical face, and yet such an utterly different spirit inside Louis as is portrayed inside Philippe. We had made the mask to fit exactly Leonardo's face, and to actually use some of the physical dimensions of his face, the expression. I wanted it to be blank, but I wanted it to convey a kind of terror of that blankness of the metal.
I can never make it right.
My lady.
I love doing this scene too. It scared me because I knew it had to be right. It was a scene that could not be wrong. We couldn't get away with it being any way but dead center perfect because we're conveying a hidden love. I thought they were just marvelous here. Anne, when she knelt, was crying so hard from such a deep place that everyone on the set kept wanting to go over and just say, "Are you okay?" And I had to keep them away from her.
I cannot bear
It's what I wanted to do too, but I knew that that's where she wanted to be. To have that kind of pain coming out of her.
Anne, I know that to love you was a treason against France.
I think this is Gabriel Byrne's favorite line in the movie. Certainly one of mine.
Then we will both die traitors, D'Artagnan.
More wine.
And to juxtapose that scene of the two hidden lovers with this scene of the Musketeers arguing.
He's had a long day.
And of all the times I've seen the movie, I've never heard anyone laugh at the line, "He's had a long day." But later on it hit me that line was a bit of an understatement.
A masquerade ball. A swirl of people, their faces covered. It is our perfect...
This was a day in which we were just desperate to find a way to get everything shot that we needed to get shot. And I told Jeremy and John that we were under the gun like that, and they helped me figure out ways to shoot it in one angle.
Oh, it'll be all right. You're just taking a while to get started.
This is an example of Gerard at his most straightforwardly brilliant, I think. You tell him what's going to happen, and he knows how to make it work.
3 weeks to learn all that he must know?
For 16 years he was educated as a gentleman.
Yes, and for 6 more.
This is a scene that came out exactly the way I had seen it when I had written it a couple of years before we shot it. Athos's passion and Aramis's arrogance and his detachment when he's thought several steps ahead. We had several dozen townspeople suddenly materialize on the night we were shooting this scene.
But what is he doing?
About to hang himself, I should think. He's been threatening to do it for months.
Hang himself?
Oh, mon Dieu.
And here's Gerard in another moment of pure genius when he holds up this rope and then stares at the limp end. It made all of us in the cutting room laugh. And some audiences enjoyed that moment. Others seemed to miss that one. But
Goodbye, cruel world. Farewell to useless Porthos.
I'm so proud of this scene as well because I had, as a first-time director, many challenges, many questions, and had repeated tests of my resolve to get this scene. From the very beginning, some people were saying, "Do you really need this barn falling? Isn't it extraneous? Can't you do without this scene?" And I thought this scene would make one of the most entertaining bits of the film. It certainly has proved to be one of the most popular among audiences.
Be useful for a change. Well, you put some clothes on. Well, okay.
I loved Gerard's take on that, and the way the other actors let him be Gerard. This was a bold move, if I may say so, of having Leo's character there in the mask. It seemed to me a real one. It seemed to me a stroke that the real character would make of having loathed the mask that he would have to wear, but then finding that he didn't feel safe when he wasn't protected inside that mask. And then the realization of what the mask has cost him. I thought through this sequence over and over. How could we do it to convey that power of the world that's been outside that he's lost? And that breathtaking holiness of the moon and nature. There were some versions of this, some runs of editing in which I thought to take out John's character there and let Athos sleep. Then I really wanted him to be aware of what Philippe had been saying, carrying into this scene. In my first drafts of the script, this scene did not butt up against the moon scene. But once we had filmed it, I realized that this had to be there, that it was so much more powerful to have Philippe, having looked at the moon, to then confront what was going on and what he was giving up to try to do what they were asking him to do.
Holding the lamb. I would tend lambs with her for the rest of my life.
We're offering you a chance to be king.
No.
This spot was one of the most beautiful places that I had ever seen, and you could see the little pond from up at the house. And when we were on our first scout of it, I just had to walk down to this place. And once I stood on the spot where the actors are standing now, I knew that had to be the place for this scene. Again, we had to struggle to get good weather. We had to pray for good weather. We could struggle all we wanted, but there was nothing we could do about it.
That's why we must eat, drink, and make love to life. As king. If you like plowmates, you can have 1,000.
All of us.
Yeah.
I have to say, too, that this is one of those scenes that really I owe a great deal of gratitude to John Malkovich about. When I was trying to recruit the actors for this, I flew into Paris and met Gerard, and we had about a 30-minute meeting in a bar in Paris with both of us drinking water. People don't believe me when I say that, but that is exactly what we were doing, and drinking only water. And I met Gerard. He stood up, shook my hand. We had talked about the movie for about 15 or 20 minutes. He stood up and shook my hand and said, "I'm doing this picture." And he jumped on his motorcycle and left. And then I went down to John Malkovich's home, not far from Avignon. And we talked about the movie, what the movie was about. John doesn't like to talk about his own role. He has a sense of what he wants to do, but he likes to talk about what the movie is, why you would make a movie like this, and what it could be. And this discussion about what the Musketeers are doing, what they're after, came out of my meeting with John, in which he said, isn't it important for us to understand that what the Musketeers are doing isn't just about what they're doing now, but about who they always were and who they always wanted to be? And as I thought about it and went back to America, I wrote this scene in which John's character lays out for all of them why he is there, and not just for the loss of his son, but for the dream they always had. That one moment when Aramis says, "If we die, and we probably will, I'll be proud to die beside you." That was a moment of pure Gerard sticking his face down to Jeremy, and then Jeremy's instant response of "and you," where the three of them were back to the relationship they had always had. My wife Christine choreographed the dancing in this movie, and it was a thrill for her and a thrill for me to watch her work with John and with Leo and with Jeremy and Gerard. It was a beautiful morning in the late spring when we shot this scene. One of those days in which you think, oh, what a business this is, to get to stand out here with these people, and not just the actors, but we had a wonderful crew around us, and to have this business.
My darling Christine, in parting from you, I have left heaven for hell.
I knew from the beginning that I wanted to do this shot in a single push-in. I knew it would take a lot out of the actress, but she came in totally ready. She came in, she sat down in the chair, and she said, "Let's go." We did 3, maybe we did a 4th take of this, but she completely gave everything in those moments. And in the end, when I asked her if she wanted to do one more, she said, "I've given you everything I have," and I knew she was right. I only ask her because you want to let the actors feel sometimes when they've gotten exactly what you want, that if they want to feel free to go one step further and try something, that they have that freedom. But Judith knew she had hit it.
What's wrong?
I received a letter from Raoul. He sent it to the...
This was a complicated scene to do.
Knowing that he would die, and I would be here.
It was important to me to have the emotion be powerful and yet be masked. To have the veil of...
I can't guess what he was thinking. He was irrational.
Of the lie.
I ordered him placed far from the fighting, but...
It was a place here, too, in which I thought there was something spiritually crucial about this moment.
Can I forgive myself?
That in Leonardo's character, the king was in a desperate situation.
I love him still.
He had built his relationship on a terrible crime and on a lie. He wanted to love this woman. He was in love with her, but he couldn't find a way out. Even as the king, maybe especially as the king, he couldn't find a way out.
I have sinned against love and God for the sake of your mercy, which you would not have given without my sin. I will burn in hell. So will you.
No, my love. You will burn in hell. I will not, for I am king.
There are times when I like to just stop and watch myself, because I have thought through this so many times, and as you direct a film, you become aware of the difficulty in getting a shot, of the difficulty in getting a performance. And you have to remember that scenes are built on magic. And it's not just an illusion, but they have to be real. and the characters, no matter what else is happening in their lives, no matter who they are, that they can believe in that moment and make those moments real for them. This is one of the most complicated shots, in fact, in the movie to get. One single shot of Aramis coming out and having this conversation with Athos, Porthos waiting, and the carriage circling around. It was an exciting shot, and one that I have to attribute to other people around who helped me through this, how to get this shot done. This setting, which is the exterior of Aramis's house, where Aramis would live in his duties as a priest, was also the place in which we filmed the siege in which Raoul is killed, and which we would later see as the exterior of the Bastille. Now, originally, I had written this scene as one in which Aramis and Porthos would come together, but then, in order to save time and also clean up the story, I used Porthos coming by himself while Aramis goes to the confessional that we'll see in the scene after this. And when I say clean up the story, I mean clean up some of the things that I had done. Not to say that Dumas needed cleaning up, but in fact, the story bears virtually no resemblance to the plot that Dumas wrote. They're certainly the characters of Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, and D'Artagnan, but to some degree I wrote them differently than he did, and the story is just not the way that Dumas made it. So once I had made my initial departure, then I felt free to go any way I needed to.
With the king, it is so.
Now this scene is important to me for so many reasons. Most of all, I think it has to do with a feeling that I have about John and Leo and something that we shared in doing this scene. We rehearsed this scene at the Manor House at the end of a long day of shooting when we were under the gun in every which way. But the three of us came into this kitchen and sat down together to work through this crucial scene in which Athos reveals to this young man the pain he feels at having lost his own son. We sat down to do it, just to walk it through casually. And what I found was that the actors that I had here generally didn't like to give a whole lot of emotion in their run-throughs. They just wanted to block things out. But John, when he did this scene, from the very beginning, said this line.
You mustn't ask about my son.
And he broke down, and tears poured out of his eyes. And Leonardo and I looked at each other, and both of us had tears running down our faces from what John had just done. It was one of the most magnificent moments that I don't think any of us will ever forget. And it affirmed for me that all of the turmoil around making a movie, all of the difficulty, the physical difficulties, the crew conflicts, the emotional struggles, the conflicts of money and casting and everything else, all boil down to whether you can put those things aside and find strength in the purity and the honesty of a performance like that.
I have raised a son who destroys lives.
And this scene, too, was the scene in which this scene was not in my original draft of the story. I was using another priest. I had another character who would be the one who handed the baby off in the original version in the opening of the movie, which I had discarded. And he would be the priest who would come and talk to the queen. But as we ran into our difficulties, I began to realize there was a way to make it straighter and cleaner and more powerful, to have Aramis be the priest who comes. And we got those terrific moments of heartfelt confession between those two people, Aramis and the Queen. It made both characters much stronger for me. I love this moment in the movie in which the emotional stage is completely set, and now the physical stage picks up, the kinetic part of the story. Carriages thundering across the countryside, and adrenaline running through the veins of the characters. I love that cut, that moment in which the music bangs through. I have to say, I was terribly proud of my wife, Christine, for the choreography of this. If you give a job to a family member, you really go out on a limb. You put them in a terrible situation too, and of pressure. And she worked out all the spacing in California on a tennis court with neighbors and friends and basketballs and tennis balls all set around to mark out the spacing. And when she came in and laid it all out in this ballroom with each angle of where everybody would look, I didn't have to worry about how to make the scene work. It was there.
My brother.
Louis XIV was fascinated with dancing and was a fantastic dancer. Leo is a fantastic dancer, but his tastes run to rap music. But he just took to this. He had the attitude and the arrogance. And this scene really soared with what was going on inside him.
Did you see that?
See what, Your Majesty?
A mask. I distinctly saw a mask.
Well, the ballroom is full of masks, Your Majesty.
This is another one of those scenes in which everything happened the way I had seen it happening in writing it. That's an incredibly satisfying thing for a writer. There are those times in which you want to have something new, you want to be surprised, you want to see the unexpected and let that go. And yet, in the end, when you can look at it and say, having done all of that, to get it to be exciting and real and fresh, it looks just like I always hoped it would. That's exciting.
Your Majesty. Your Majesty.
We built this set. This is a set. We were unable to find practical locations that had passageways and all that we needed.
It's Judgment Day.
That punch made everybody wince in the test audience.
Don't look so shocked, Philippe.
This is another of those scenes in which I thought the contributions of everybody were so apparent. The production designer's work was fantastic here to give us this this atmosphere. I think the scene is expertly edited as well, and the music, I think, is brilliantly shot. It was a way in which I was really proud of the team. By this point in the story, John and Leo had developed their characters to the extent that they knew them completely. We talked just a little bit about that this would be the moment in which they said goodbye, that their nerves would be full, like a father watching his son off to school, only a school that might kill him.
You have the heart of a king.
I love what John did there. Back to the swirl and the glory of this ballroom. Costumes were by James Atchison, who just did a brilliant job. This was pure Leo. Put the mask to his face, scanned the room with his eyes. It was crucial for me to see this subjectively, for us to be inside his head and see that goal, that throne, coming closer and closer, and his new destiny, his identity, that far ahead of him. And to make this a glorious moment of ascension, I think Nick's music was fantastic for this here too.
Continue.
Nick was great in shifting the music. Christine had found different music to choreograph to, and I had told her that I didn't want to be, I had said that I didn't want to be too caught up in trying to be authentic, that we would work out the music later. Nick took the music that she had used for the different dances and then wrote something original that had the same flavor. I reordered this sequence of what happens in the ballroom from what I had originally done in my first drafts of the script, but I changed it on the script level before we shot it to be this sequence of the woman stumbling and the king helping, and then the appearance of the queen, and later on the appearance of the mistress Christine. Originally I had those things inverted. Saw, as I worked through it, that it would be better this way. The sight of the nun attendant has always made me weep. When we were at the premiere of Man in the Iron Mask, I sat next to my mother and father, and my mother was right next to me, and I took her hand as the film started and held it through the movie. At this moment, I looked at my mother and she was weeping, and I knew then that no matter what else happened in this film, that I had won. These guys here, at this point in the filming, knew their characters so thoroughly, And they had so much energy and so much teamwork about that. So when we were shooting this sequence, it was like, say action and boom, they knew just what to do. That too is one of my favorite parts of the movie. When Philippe reaches and holds the hand of his mother.
I retire now. Wait 2 dances. Then withdraw to your room. And spend the night in safety.
When we were casting Anne Perriot, Anne and I had a lot of discussions, and she and Russell Smith, the producer, and I talked at length about whether or not we could make Anne look old enough to be believable to be Leo's mother. What we really decided was that the heart she carried and the dignity, being a woman who was quite young in the story when she had her sons, was what would carry this moment and make it real. I love what she did. She had never played a period piece before, so she carried herself with that kind of slow grandeur. Gabriel and I had a lot of discussions too about these particular moments and what is revealed. It's nothing that I had to explain to him. It was more that he wanted to be sure that the way he was taking it was the way I saw it as well, and if there was anything further that we could mine from these moments. What Gabe said to me was the greatest character to play in anything is the character who has a secret, because that secret adds power and dimension to everything he does.
I wrote as you, demanding to know why the general disregarded the order to keep Raoul out of danger.
I love this scene too. I love what Judith did. She showed up on the set with her face wild, with the sorrow and the power of this.
Take your hands off!
Let me go!
You're hurting her!
It was such a difficult moment to play, and she did it with such power.
I have wronged you. I will make amends.
And Leo felt exactly what he wanted to do here. The gestures, the breath, the uncertainty, and yet the absolute clarity that he could not stop being who he was, even as he tries to hold on to the illusion that he is the king.
All the passages.
Continue.
When you're editing a sequence like this, you always wonder if you've told the audience enough or told them too much.
Security, Your Majesty. I must ask.
When we were showing this at the first test audience, and we did the push in on D'Artagnan, the test audience went, ooh. And I looked over at Bill Hoy, the editor, and Bill was grinning.
Certainly.
He knew we'd gotten it. This is the first shot that I made as a director. We started here in this whole sequence, from the opening of that statue down through the end of this water passage sequence was our first week of shooting. We jumped into the most difficult spot. The strategy being that we would have time to rehearse and work this out. Whether it was a good strategy or not, it's difficult to say, but it worked for us. We jumped into the most difficult sequence physically in the film. in which everyone was fighting. Everybody had to be their character. It forced us to a moment of clarity right from the very beginning. This is the kind of movie we're going to make. There won't be any sword fighting, 2 men at once and jumping over the slashes of your opponent while you're eating an apple. There won't be any swinging from the draperies. If a man is coming at you with a blade, then somebody's going to bleed, and it better be him.
I am Porthos! Unify the king!
It was when I walked through this set and laid out for everyone, the cast and the crew, what I intended to shoot there, that I began to feel, well, the best thing a director can do is make a decision. Good, bad, or indifferent. You've got to make one, have a point of view, have an idea of where you're going to go, and give everybody a chance to help you. Give them a chance to tell you they think it works, or here's something that might work better. And we ended up with this sequence exactly the way I'd laid it out. It was a great challenge, not only because we had all of the musketeers there and all of the layers of what was going on with them, but we also had the two Leos. And in this scene, there is no digital effect work at all. We just used photo doubles in order to achieve the two Leos, the Louis and Philippe characters, side by side. It was at this point that we began to have discussions about how to look at this, how to convey to everyone what I really wanted to get here, what we were really after. And we began to use the term like a Western. This was a scene like a classic showdown in a Western. I was actually in France when I realized that the way to do this scene was to have D'Artagnan make the move in which he puts his blade to Philippe and says to Athos, "You take my king and I'll take yours."
You take my king, and I shall take yours.
I remember calling Los Angeles to Rebecca Pollack, who is the studio's creative executive and with whom I've done a lot of work in the past, and telling her that I'd had this idea and I thought that was a good line, and asking her, "Is it really?" And she said, "Oh, I think that'll work great." It's a kind of thing when you are vulnerable when you're making a movie. You need to believe absolutely in what you're doing, but you also need people to believe with you, and you need to be open for other people's ideas, and at the same time you have to be absolutely dedicated to getting what you think is right, to getting the movie that is the movie you want to see. Otherwise, it seems to me you can have no center. We decided to get that one close-up at the end. I thought I'd just have to see D'Artagnan's face there, and gave it such heart. This is the one place in the movie in which we used digital effects, of course.
I was told this imposter was dead.
It was something that that we worked out. Fortunately, I had a great storyboard artist, Dan Sweetman, who had done a good deal of work on other films in which digital effects are used. And Dan was the first one to lay out for me how he thought this would work best. And then as we consulted other experts, we found that this was a way we could do it, which would be absolutely convincing to do this crossover move. This is a scene that was one of my finest hours, I think. Gabe and Leo told me later that on the day we shot this scene that they were sitting in the makeup trailer together and looked over at each other and said almost simultaneously, "I hate this scene. I don't know what it's about. I just don't know what to do in this scene. Why are we doing this scene?" And they said, "Well, we'll go and just sort of try to muddle our way through it." And when they came to the set and they said to me that they weren't sure we needed this scene and they had problems in figuring it out, it was a great chance to sit down together and say, well, remember, this is not about revealing any plot point. This is about revealing the true heart of the characters, the pain that Louis feels.
For one moment, I thought you had become the king I always hoped you'd be.
The pain that Louis feels when D'Artagnan tells him that he does not approve. When Louis realizes that D'Artagnan believes Philippe is a better and more worthy man to be king. We had takes in which Leo gave me readings that had more anger in them. But in this performance, he gave not only a huge amount of anger, but an enormous depth of heart and feeling. He gave this the full measure of his vulnerability and his pain. And that's what made it magnificent to me.
And into the mask you hate.
Louis, don't!
Wear it until you love it! And die in it.
From the moment I saw this set, I knew that this would be the shot that I would use to show these characters the magnificence of the palace and the intimacy of just these two lovers. When we were filming it, at first we had a struggle because the actors knew there was such sadness involved in this, and then we talked about it, that this was a moment of release. I asked Gabe to maybe try a smile. And when he did it, all the feeling of that moment came out and showed on film. We wondered if anyone would notice the rope, and we dubbed in the sound of a rope.
Where is she?
Of a rope creaking there in the window. I love the spooky, surreal track that Nick Glennie Smith gave us here of music, like a choir somewhere in hell.
Where are you taking me?
This whole Bastille sequence was a fantastic challenge to shoot. It was dark. It made it difficult to get the lighting right. And Peter Shishitsky, I think, did a really terrific job in capturing the faces and the nuance of color. This is a scene that was extremely painful to watch. It was hard to write and to feel of what it would be like to go back into that mask once you had been freed.
Done as you ordered, Your Majesty. When D'Artagnan returns, watch him. And when he leaves again, you tell me. Your Majesty.
We had discussions about whether or not the king looked too casual here and should be more formally dressed, but I wanted to show him disheveled a bit. That having been carried away as he was and nearly kidnapped, that he was at the edge where he was no longer worried about the formality of his office, but the terrible duty that he was about to perform.
Philippe has been moved to the lower dungeon of the Bastille. At midnight tonight.
I love this shot here, the three of them together like that. That's one of my favorite views in the whole movie. Another Vermeer-like shot, but those three faces, those three guys.
I'd rather die covered in blood than an old man lying in my own piss.
When we first had our discussions on the script, the first week of rehearsal, 2 weeks before we began to shoot, everyone else came with tons of questions, but Gerard roared up on his motorcycle. He walked in, he held up the script, and he said loudly to everyone within hearing, "This is perfect. All you have to do is just say it. Don't have to think about it. Just say it and be it. It's perfect." And I could have kissed him. Some people think this is a painting or a mat. That is, in fact, the real location. We started to ask ourselves when, in the test audiences, they said, well, you know, on that set where you had that Bastille, started to ask ourselves if there was a way we could time the developing of the film to show more that it was, in fact, real. But the stonework just had that patina. It looks, in my opinion, the trouble was it looked so good that people thought it couldn't be real.
Of course, it's no trouble getting in. The problems will come when we want to get out.
We had laughter in that moment, too, when John says his line about the problems will come when we want to get out. And I was excited to find that the humor was working even among the dramatics. This is one of those nakedly romantic scenes that we could have edited out of the movie if we had thought the movie was only about plot and speed and pacing. But this is a scene that no one suggested should go. Wouldn't have gotten anywhere with me anyway. I love this scene. To some degree, this scene brings out the boy in me, the race of time, the creak of the cages, and the clatter of the horses' hooves across the cobblestones.
Is this what you're looking for?
Now, this was one of those places that causes a lot of worry about something that may or may not be important, but this character, when he reveals his ear, that his ear has been cut, he was the character that Athos cut when he rides in to try to kill the king, and that was the character who put the saber to Athos's throat. And then Athos grabs the blade of the saber with his gloved hand, slices off the guy's ear, and throws the dagger into the chest of the musketeer coming in from his side. I'd hoped, of course, that people would recognize it was the same guy, but in the end I thought, if you stop and worry about that question too much, you're not caught up in the film. So now we're at the point at which D'Artagnan rejoins his friends for the final surge of this whole plot. The question of why he's been apart from them, why he has stood away from them, separated himself. And now he comes back to join them and die with them, if need be. This is a spot at which, in the editing, we could feel the surge of energy that now this is about motion, that the urgency has risen to the right spot. And now we know that we are at the climax of the film. We know that the story, that the lives of these characters has brought us to this moment. Early on, our composer played me something that was like a funeral dirge. And I told him that no, I thought this was the most glorious moment of the film because it's what each of them would want, the chance to die shoulder to shoulder with his friends. I love the way Gerard comes walking down that corridor looking like a lion. And I always loved the way John would fight. He so loved it, and there would be times when I really wanted to pick everyone up that I would turn to John and say, okay, I want to film your fighting because I knew that would inspire everyone. All the guys had different styles of fighting, just like they had different styles of acting. But in the end, they all came out in a way that was utterly them. And because it was them, it made it convincing. I had a constant struggle to stay on the line that I wanted here. Once you say Musketeer movie, everybody wants to come in with all sorts of elaborate choreography, and I wanted to keep all of that out. A fist fight in the real world doesn't last a long time, and a sword fight could not possibly last very long. There's a way in which this entire scene was inspired by something in the work of C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis wrote a series of books for children, but really they're for the child in all of us, called The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And in that final sequence, the final sequence of those books, it's in the 7th book, a lion and a unicorn and a bear are surrounded.
Perhaps you should take his offer. We're dead anyway.
This was a really difficult sequence to do. We had the fighting in this corridor. We called it the Bastille corridor in our set nomenclature. We had the fighting of the charges. We had the final charge coming up. We had these two huge moments at either end of the corridor. The one in which D'Artagnan reveals his true relationship with Philippe and Louis. And then the events at the other end of the corridor after the charge. We had to try to get all of that done within just a few days' time. It was not enough. And that was why we had to make the decisions about the other pieces of the film, how to get the beginning in a more compressed and efficient way, and how to pick up days throughout the schedule. I think those things actually, those challenges, require you to try to be inventive and creative and to try to take yourself to a higher level of focus. I love this scene. I love what each of the characters is showing, and the affection that they show for each other. I was able to believe it. I was always able to look at these men and feel that they had become the Musketeers. And that Leo was the characters that he was playing, that Philippe and Louis were aspects of his own character.
But if we must die, let it be like this.
Gabe came up with that double emphasis, if we must die, if we must die. It wasn't written that way, and when I first heard him say it, I thought it was a mistake that he intended or expected us to edit out. It was so good and ragged that it made it feel more real. I love this moment. I absolutely love it.
Shoot.
These young French men who played the young musketeers were wild-eyed, truly wild-eyed there. And the line of Edward Atherton, magnificent valor, was a line that a lot of people laughed at me about and said they thought would be corny, and yet I felt it was at the heart of what it meant to be a musketeer, at the heart of something higher and broader and better than most any of us would ever attain, but it was a goal, a recognition of courage, of the ideal that they all wanted to attain. And in this shot, we hung and hung and hung on the smoke, trying to decide what was the optimum period of time to do it. It's one of those things like singing a song. You just have to sing it and feel when it resonates in your heart to do. There are in the charge shots of the bullets ripping into the men, a bullet into the thigh of Athos and the shoulder of D'Artagnan, through the capes. They're so fast that many people miss them, but they are there. And this was the other scene that we had to film all in that one compressed period of time. For me, as a first-time director, laying out the angles and the fighting of this was a matter of constant simplification down to the essence of what was happening. In some ways, it's counter to what is done in most contemporary films, in which you use a lot of cuts and a lot of camera movement, a lot of shake, which I always think of as being ways to make up for the essential drama of the pure character action. That one brother is fighting another. The father of both steps between them. I wanted to believe in that, depend on that, to make the scene show itself.
All my life.
When Athos asked for this forgiveness,
This is the death I have
that's the key that opens the door of this moment. D'Artagnan to declare at this moment in his life that this was his ultimate moment. Leo and I discussed many times that line, "You are the one in the mask." It was a more elaborate line early on, and we simplified it to that, and even then he wasn't sure about it. But then he played it with such power and simplicity. When he wept, I think that's the moment that makes the audience moved.
All I ever wanted to be was him.
There was a thought, too, about whether or not we needed that line in which Lieutenant Andre explains that all his life he wanted to be like D'Artagnan. I thought that line was crucial to help us understand, in fact, why the young musketeers can't bear to shoot the older musketeers, and why, in fact, they look away and avert their aim.
Let him find redemption in wearing the pains he has placed on others. Take him. And them?
I had not originally expected this moment to be the kind of moment that it became. When I wrote it, I thought it was a simple gesture. And in fact, it was a simple gesture. But when we reached this moment in the story, and they gripped each other and staggered to their knees, I think everybody watching it that loved the picture knew that it was a moment of heart.
In nomine Patri, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
When we walked this field for the first time, I knew right away that it would be the final resting place of D'Artagnan.
Athos.
We had many discussions about this moment as well.
After all you have done, I must ask you one more service.
The movie could have been played without it,
Son to a father, and I pray you live
but it seemed to me that it was the absolute completion
to love me like your son.
of Athos and Philippe. It was the thing that really told us that Philippe was a man with heart. That all the other musketeers had gotten what they wanted. Aramis had found his redemption, his absolution, and Porthos had found his relevance. Athos had lost his son and was going off into a life of loneliness. But then Philippe remembers him and gives him something to fill his heart for the rest of his days. That was a piece of this movie I couldn't do without.
It was whispered among his jailers that he received the royal
I had wanted 2 or 3 times the number of horses to make a magnificent arch of horses, but we didn't have them. In the end, it was watching the musketeers walk away that mattered the most, not the horses.
And peace, and is remembered as the greatest ruler in
And this was the shot that I knew would show us the beauty in D'Artagnan's death and the magical rose. The design of the mask was one of the most crucial aspects of the production of the film. In many ways, a small problem to attack because it was so clear what we had to do, but it was wide open as to what we could do. The way the mask looked would identify the film for all of us and would convey, I thought, to everyone who worked on the film what our approach was going to be, how artistic, how literal. So I drew everyone together, and we sat down in a room and started to throw around ideas about what it would be. I wanted to get everyone's advice and everyone's input and then make a decision. And I kept rejecting idea after idea after idea because they were garish. We started with masks that looked like hockey masks and slasher masks and others that looked terribly primitive. One of our designs had an almost Hannibal Lecter look to it. Some of the designs were quite artistic and looked like masks from the twin faces of drama. In the end, I think the key was conveying to everyone working on the mask that I wanted the mask to have emotion. I wanted it to have a face, and so ultimately we molded it to Leo's face and stripped out the emotional parts of it until it looked like his face with it set into iron, and that became our mask.